Everything you've been taught about reality, how it works, what's possible, what's real has been incomplete at best and deliberately obscured at worst. You've been conditioned to pursue outcomes without ever being privy to the invisible forces that orchestrate them. You strive, set objectives, repeat affirmations, and relentlessly chase progress. Yet an underlying unease persists, as if you're navigating a game without understanding the fundamental rules. This is because the true rules weren't designed for widespread dissemination. They've remained conspicuous yet concealed, nestled within ancient texts, encrypted in symbolism, and passed down through generations by those who grasped reality's authentic mechanics. One such illuminating work is the Kybalion, a seemingly unassuming text that doesn't impose a new belief system but rather unveils the intrinsic laws underpinning existence. It doesn't demand worship, it invites comprehension. Because once you achieve understanding, you transcend reactive living and embrace conscious creation. Once you decipher the code, it becomes impossible to ignore. For many, life unfolds as a sequence of fragmented incidents, a blend of random peaks and valleys bound together by hope, perseverance, and routine. You awaken, pursue aspirations, address challenges, and strive to stay afloat. Yet beneath the veneer of what we perceive as reality lies a structure, a system of such precision and fundamentality that its influence remains constant regardless of your belief. This inherent system is what the Kybalion refers to as the Hermetic principles. Not mere theories or abstract philosophies, but immutable laws, omnipresent and operative at every echelon of existence. These laws were conspicuously absent from your formal education. They weren't imparted by your parents during family meals. Your instructors neglected to mention them during school announcements, and society itself seems to flourish upon your ignorance of them. Because when you truly grasp the inner workings of this system, you become exponentially more resilient to manipulation. You cease reacting and commence creating. You transition from being a mere passenger to becoming the architect. This is precisely why the teachings embedded within the Kybalion have been relegated to the shadows, confined to clandestine mystery schools, buried beneath layers of symbolic representation, subtly alluded to in esoteric practices, and rarely discussed in mainstream discourse. These principles weren't meant to be erased from existence. They were intended to be preserved for those who actively sought deeper understanding. The Kybalion delineates 7 universal laws that govern everything from the cosmic dance of galaxies to the intricacies of your innermost thoughts. These aren't ethereal concepts floating in the spiritual realm. These laws mold your relationships, your overall well-being, your professional trajectory, and your very sense of self. They dictate the mechanisms of manifestation, the processes of healing, and the cyclical patterns that either repeat or break. And if you've ever pondered why events seem to merely happen to you, the answer is quite straightforward. You've been navigating life under these laws without possessing the knowledge to actively engage with them. Imagine attempting to play chess without comprehending the rules, merely reacting to each piece as it moves, perpetually perplexed by your consistent losses. This epitomizes the reality for many, but the Kybalion provides the rulebook, and the instant you peruse it, you begin to perceive the board with renewed clarity. The pieces no longer feel so daunting. You transcend the role of a mere pawn. Some of the profounder applications of these laws are, unfortunately, too sensitive to be shared openly on this platform. That's why we've established the Insights Academy, our complimentary newsletter. What's genuinely astonishing isn't solely the existence of these laws, but their unwavering neutrality in operation. The universe remains indifferent to your awareness of them. It doesn't discriminate based on your alignment or opposition. Just as gravity exists irrespective of your belief, these principles simply are, implying that you're either collaborating harmoniously with reality or contending against it. And when you find yourself in opposition, life manifests as chaotic, unpredictable, and frustrating. Your attempts at manifestation falter, desirable outcomes remain elusive, detrimental patterns persist, and you resign yourself to attributing these experiences to sheer misfortune, unfavorable timing, or negative energy. However, the underlying cause is misalignment. Once you initiate alignment with these fundamental laws, synchronicity amplifies, anxieties dissipate, resistance diminishes, and patterns begin to unveil their underlying significance not as mere coincidences, but as reflections of your own consciousness. You awaken to the realization that randomness is an illusion, that life is consistently delivering precisely what you project mentally, emotionally, and energetically. And this isn't a matter of sorcery or religious dogma. It transcends the realm of belief and resides purely within the domain of mechanics. The Kybalion remains unconcerned with your personal convictions. It simply elucidates how the intricate engine operates beneath the surface. It unveils the blueprint, and herein lies its profound efficacy. It restores your personal agency, not through saccharine positivity or delusional escapism, but through genuine comprehension. Because once you comprehend the mechanics of this extraordinary machine, you can liberate yourself from confusion and dispel the associated fears. You can then begin to skillfully utilize it. These laws don't promise an existence devoid of challenges, but they assuredly promise an existence infused with unparalleled clarity. An existence where guesswork is replaced by understanding, where stumbling in the dark gives way to purposeful navigation, and where you move in harmony with the currents rather than being overwhelmed by them. The blueprint was never irretrievably lost. It simply remained unrevealed to you. However, the gateway is now open. The foremost and most influential principle articulated within the Kybalion is the Law of Mentalism. It posited simply that all is mind, that every aspect of your experience, from the tangible to the intangible, originates within consciousness, not as a mere metaphorical construct or a product of mysticism, but as the foundational framework of reality itself. The universe, according to this principle, is fundamentally mental, and if this concept seems implausible or excessively abstract, it's merely because you've been conditioned to perceive reality as being composed of matter. That authenticity resides in the tangible, the measurable, and the distinct from thought. But what if this prevailing perspective is fundamentally flawed? What if consciousness doesn't arise from the confines of the brain, but rather the brain serves as a receiver of consciousness? What if thoughts aren't merely confined to the confines of your mind, but extend outwards, influencing form and function, relationships and outcomes? Envision it as a projector. Your mind isn't merely an observer of the movie, it's the orchestrator of its unfolding. What you believe becomes what you perceive. What you anticipate becomes what you encounter, not through random chance, but through inherent structure. This all-encompassing law isn't merely confined to abstract concepts. It governs every facet of your existence, including the contours of your life, the quality of your interpersonal relationships, the state of your well-being, and even those occurrences you attribute to mere luck or predetermined fate. All originates from the mind. Every time you utter the phrase, "That's just how life is," you're essentially casting a vote in favor of your self-imposed limitations. Every instance you perceive something as being excessively difficult, occurring too late or improbable, you're not merely observing reality, you're actively reinforcing it. Because, according to the Hermetic model, belief doesn't follow experience. Experience follows belief. This is where modern society has led us astray. We've been conditioned to seek externally for answers, solutions, and validation. We await life to bestow permission upon us to experience inner peace, professional fulfillment, and intrinsic worthiness. But the Kybalion radically inverts this conventional logic. It asserts that your inner realm creates your external realm, that to effectuate transformative change in your life, you shouldn't commence by forcibly manipulating your external environment. Instead, you must commence by mastering your own mind. Because until you achieve this mastery, any alterations you implement will be merely superficial, a rearrangement of the surface while the deeper patterns remain unchanged. It's not about merely engaging in positive thinking or superficially applying affirmations over underlying trauma. It's about fundamentally comprehending that every facet of your experience is filtered through the lens of your mind, and the caliber of your thoughts invariably determines the texture of your existence. When you perceive yourself as weak, life mirrors that perceived weakness. When you perceive yourself as unworthy, life reflects experiences of rejection. But when you comprehend that you are the origin, not the mere echo, you cease awaiting the world to transform and instead embrace your inherent role as the source of that transformation. And this is precisely what renders this principle so perilous to systems predicated on control. Because once you internalize that you are the projector, the entire game undergoes a fundamental shift. You no longer need to beseech for opportunities, seek external validation, or clamor for personal power. You awaken to the realization that you've possessed it all along. You've merely been directing it unconsciously. Your state wasn't powerlessness, it was misdirection. This isn't an endorsement of ego-driven behavior or delusional wishful thinking. It's an affirmation of alignment. When you attune your inner state with clarity, focused intent, and unwavering purpose, the external world gradually begins to resonate harmoniously, not because it's merely reacting to your actions, but because it is inherently you. There exists no genuine separation between your thoughts and your tangible experiences. They are two facets of the same unified source. The law of mentalism unveils that all separation is illusory, that you are not merely within the universe, passively observing it from an external vantage point. You are intrinsically of it, actively thinking it into existence. When you internalize this truth, not solely on an intellectual level, but on an experiential one, everything undergoes a profound transformation. You cease the futile pursuit of external validation and begin to attract opportunities effortlessly. You transition from merely addressing symptoms to fundamentally transforming underlying causes. You begin to discern how the world subtly bends in response to your prevailing emotional tone, your deeply held belief structures, and your overall mental atmosphere. And it's within this realization that you comprehend this isn't magic. This is the fundamental operating system of reality itself, and for the first time, you possess the user manual. There's a profound reason why ancient mystics, alchemists, and philosophers frequently reiterated one particular phrase more frequently than any other: as above, so below, as within, so without. This wasn't merely poetic expression or symbolic representation. It was an assertion of literal truth. It functioned as a key, a cipher, a universal law that revealed the fractal nature of reality, how everything is inherently interconnected, how everything mirrors itself. What transpires in the vast reaches of the cosmos is echoed within your inner being. What unfolds within your internal world shapes the external one. Nothing stands alone. When the Kybalion expounds upon the Law of Correspondence, it's not imploring you to adopt mystical beliefs. It's conveying that patterns recurrently manifest across all planes of existence. The microcosm mirrors the macrocosm. Galaxies swirl in a manner analogous to atoms. Tides ebb and flow in a rhythm resembling breath. The emotions you attempt to suppress invariably resurface within your physical body, your overall health, and your surrounding environment. That inner voice you frequently hear within the confines of your mind inevitably manifests in the manner in which others address, treat, and reflect you. Because reality doesn't function through disjointed fragments, it operates through the principles of correspondence. This underscores why addressing external challenges requires confronting internal patterns. Individuals fervently pursue wealth without examining their underlying beliefs regarding scarcity. They demand respect while simultaneously harboring feelings of self-loathing. They desperately seek love while burdened by abandonment traumas within their nervous systems. And when life doesn't deliver their desired outcomes, they fault the external world, oblivious to the fact that the world has merely been mirroring their innermost convictions. This isn't a form of divine retribution, it's simply an instance of profound precision. Reality harbors no animosity toward you. It merely mirrors your inner state, and that mirror operates with relentless consistency, not out of malice, but out of inherent fidelity. If your inner realm is characterized by chaos, your life will inevitably reflect that chaos. If you harbor the belief that you are undeserving, life will persistently manifest situations that reinforce that conviction. But herein lies the transformative power of this law. The instant you initiate a shift within your inner self, the mirror itself begins to transform. You needn't relentlessly pursue transformation across myriad domains of your existence. You merely need to modify the internal blueprint, and the external architecture will respond in congruence. Contemplate the frequency with which individuals attempt to rectify challenges from an external vantage point. They may prematurely resign from their current job, abruptly terminate a committed relationship, or even relocate to a new city, only to discover that the same pervasive patterns continue to pursue them. The scenery may change, but the underlying narrative invariably remains consistent. This isn't an instance of misfortune. It's an inevitable consequence of correspondence. Until the inner frequency undergoes a fundamental transformation, the external script will relentlessly repeat itself because the world isn't fundamentally flawed, it's intrinsically accurate in its reflections. This underscores the importance of engaging in inner work, and it elucidates why the act of reflection isn't an indulgent exercise but a fundamental necessity, because until you effectively cleanse the emotional static within yourself, your life will continue to reflect outdated software. What you genuinely require isn't an alteration of external circumstances, it's an infusion of internal clarity, a practice of emotional hygiene, restoration of nervous system equilibrium, and recalibration of underlying beliefs. And once these pivotal shifts take root, life will inevitably begin to unfold in an entirely new and transformative manner. People will respond with increased receptivity. Opportunities will cease to feel like random accidents and will instead feel like tangible reflections of your evolved self. Correspondence also empowers you to derive profound insights about yourself through mindful observation of the world that surrounds you. What consistently triggers emotional responses within you isn't solely external. It's an echo of unresolved inner discord. What patterns recurrently manifest within your interpersonal relationships? What recurring themes persistently emerge within the individuals you attract? Your life is constantly striving to impart profound wisdom regarding your prevailing vibration. The critical question remains whether you're willing to attentively observe and learn from these signals. Even on a grander cosmic scale, this inherent law maintains its pervasive influence. The intricate structure of the atom mirrors the overarching structure of the solar system. Your lungs bear a striking resemblance to the branching patterns of a tree. Your nervous system mirrors the intricate web of the internet. These patterns are ubiquitously present because their source is ultimately singular. This isn't mere spiritual fluff. It's sacred mathematics in its purest form. The Hermetic tradition emphasizes that when you diligently study one layer of existence with meticulous care, you invariably gain profound insights into all others. Develop a comprehensive understanding of your own mind, and you inevitably begin to comprehend the very nature of reality itself. Learn to effectively regulate your emotional responses, and you inevitably begin to unlock the profound potential of manifestation. Learn to effectively decipher your recurring patterns, and you invariably begin to rewrite your destiny. As above, so below signifies that you are never genuinely separate from anything. You are the microcosm reflecting the macrocosm, a living portal through which the universe experiences its very essence, and once you internalize this profound truth, you transcend the role of a mere observer and become an active participant in conscious creation. You're collaborating harmoniously with the echo instead of fruitlessly resisting the reflection, and subsequently, everything begins to align accordingly. Everything vibrates, everything moves, nothing rests. That's not poetic license, it's foundational physics, and long before modern science could substantiate it, the Kybalion had already declared it as truth. The law of vibration stands as one of the most widely misunderstood, yet profoundly impactful principles in the entirety of the Hermetic system. It teaches that nothing is fundamentally fixed or static, not your emotions, not your perceived reality, and not even the thoughts that you've convinced yourself are simply the way it is. Every single facet of your experience, joy, pain, failure, love, possesses a distinctive frequency, and that frequency is inherently mutable, which unequivocally implies that your life isn't irrevocably stuck. It's perpetually vibrating. While you might not consciously perceive it at all times, on a quantum level, everything from the table you touch to the very breath you inhale to the words you express is in a constant state of motion, oscillation, and resonance. You're essentially immersed in a boundless sea of frequency, and your physical body, mind, and spirit are all serving as intricate instruments operating within that field. When you experience the sense of unease or dissonance in the presence of certain individuals or within particular environments, this isn't merely a matter of personal mood. It's a consequence of vibrational mismatch. Vibration recognizes and responds to corresponding vibrations, and your life, whether you consciously recognize it or not, is constantly organizing itself in alignment with the predominant frequency you're emitting. This inherent law strikes even deeper when you grasp that you don't attract what you desire. You attract what you inherently are, what you're intrinsically tuned to. If your core frequency is fundamentally rooted in fear, then fear-based experiences will inevitably seek you out. If your predominant vibration is one of scarcity, then opportunities will inevitably feel scarce. It's not a matter of personal bias or intentional targeting, it's simply an outcome of harmonic resonance. Reality doesn't respond to the words you outwardly express, it responds to the vibrations you inwardly radiate. This is precisely why you can diligently engage in all the right actions, consistently recite positive affirmations, and vividly visualize your dream life, yet still experience the frustrating sensation of being perpetually stuck. Because the determining factor isn't the content on your vision board. It's the ingrained programming within your nervous system. It's determined by the emotions you genuinely feel when no one is observing, and the beliefs you deeply hold when everything is silent. Vibration isn't something you superficially feign or outwardly perform, it's something you authentically embody, and genuine embodiment doesn't stem from mere surface-level performance, it emerges from profound inner alignment. Begin conceiving of your emotional states not as mere annoyances or inconveniences, but as distinctive frequencies. Anger, grief, joy, and gratitude, each possesses its own unique vibrational signature. You've undoubtedly felt it. Gratitude uplifts you and elevates your spirit. Grief draws you inward and intensifies introspection. Anxiety scatters your internal signal and disrupts clarity. This isn't merely a metaphorical representation, it's the tangible, felt experience of vibrational resonance, and the truly empowering realization is that you're not irrevocably confined to any singular vibrational state. You possess the capacity to shift. You can recalibrate, not instantaneously or perfectly, but with deliberate intention. That's precisely what the law of vibration empowers you with. The ability to consciously influence your own vibrational frequency and in doing so, reshape the very field of possibilities that surrounds you. This elucidates why practices like meditation, controlled breathwork, sound healing modalities, and even periods of intentional silence can be so profoundly effective. They don't merely induce a state of calmness, they actively tune you, helping you descend below the superficial noise and access your fundamental base frequency. And once you achieve conscious awareness of that baseline frequency, you can consciously initiate a process of deliberate shifting. You become more discerning and intentional regarding what you choose to consume: media, food, and conversations, because everything either elevates or diminishes your vibrational state. Neutrality is an illusion, and this extends even further. The law of vibration elucidates why certain melodies resonate with you on a profound level, why particular environments drain your energy, and why some individuals effortlessly illuminate a room while others subtly dim it. It's all governed by frequency. Certain frequencies expand your awareness and uplift your spirit, while others compress your energy and constrict your potential. Most individuals, unfortunately, never cultivate the ability to effectively discern these subtle nuances. They navigate life on autopilot, habitually reacting to their surrounding environment, oblivious to the fact that they're passively absorbing the dominant vibrations of every room they enter, every piece of content they passively consume, and every voice they unwittingly allow to influence them. But once you comprehend this fundamental law, you transcend the realm of mere reaction and consciously choose to tune your internal state. You cease attributing experiences to a mere bad day, and instead begin to ask yourself, what specific frequency did I unwittingly slip into? You cease attributing circumstances as being solely responsible for your challenges and consciously choose to manage your prevailing inner state. You realize that you're not merely a passive participant, you're an active broadcaster, and the world is invariably responding in direct correlation with your emitted signal. You don't elevate your vibration through forced positivity or a denial of reality. You elevate it through a conscious commitment to clarity, through a willingness to release what no longer resonates with your authentic self, and through a consistent reminder that movement is always possible, that stillness is an illusion, and that regardless of how long you may have felt entrenched, the truth remains that you've always been vibrating, and now you're empowered to consciously choose the frequency you radiate. The majority of individuals navigate their lives at the mercy of circumstances. They attribute their lack of financial prosperity to the prevailing economic climate, their unresolved emotional wounds to their formative childhood experiences, and their pervasive unhappiness to their intimate partners. everything is invariably attributed to someone else's fault or something else's doing. However, the Kybalion elucidates that this very mindset serves as the definitive hallmark of those who are perpetually trapped on the receiving end of reality. Those who passively wait, blindly react, and rationalize everything. The law of cause and effect serves as the pivotal dividing line between being a passive observer of your life and actively becoming a conscious creator of it. This fundamental principle asserts that nothing transpires merely by random chance. Every single outcome possesses a corresponding cause. Every resultant effect has an underlying origin. If something exists within your life, it didn't simply materialize ex nihilo. It was actively created, either directly or indirectly, by forces that you either consciously initiated or passively allowed. And until you comprehend this profound truth, you'll inevitably continue to perceive your life as a sequence of chaotic events rather than the consequences of your actions. You'll persist in attributing events to mere misfortune rather than conscious misalignment. You'll persist in feeling victimized, even when the underlying truth is far more empowering. You've inherently been the source all along. Now, this doesn't imply that every painful occurrence within your life is solely your fault. But it does emphatically mean that everything within your life is ultimately your responsibility. There exists a crucial distinction. Fault perpetuates a state of being perpetually stuck, while responsibility serves to liberate you, because once you consciously acknowledge that you inherently possess the power to cause, you simultaneously acknowledge that you inherently possess the power to effectuate meaningful change. This law serves as a catalyst for breaking free from ingrained helplessness. It snaps you out of superficial spiritual bypassing and compels you to confront the myriad choices, both conscious and unconscious, that have collectively shaped your current reality. Pause for a moment and consider, how frequently have you uttered phrases such as, "Why does this perpetually happen to me?" Or, "Why am I perpetually unable to catch a break?" Embedded within those very questions lies an underlying assumption that life is inherently random, that outcomes are fundamentally unfair, and that reality is inherently operating in opposition to your best interests. However, that limiting perspective can only exist when you fundamentally misunderstand this pivotal law, when you fail to realize that repetitive patterns serve as tangible evidence of repetitive causes, and that nothing is merely showing up to you. It's ultimately showing up from you. When you truly internalize this empowering principle, everything undergoes a profound shift. You cease attempting to exert control over other individuals and instead diligently focus on mastering your own personal energy. You cease seeking external validation and instead consciously align with your internal integrity. You begin to ask far more constructive questions, not merely why me, but what recurring pattern am I perpetuating? What deeply ingrained belief is driving this particular outcome? What habitual thought or action is actively feeding this outcome? Those are the transformative questions that someone who is actively transitioning from the role of effect to the role of cause, from the perceived role of a victim to the empowering role of an architect. You also begin to discern how other individuals navigate their lives, frequently ensnared within self-created loops, not because they're inherently lazy or fundamentally broken, but because they've simply never been taught this inherent law. They persistently attempt to rectify the outcomes of their experiences, rather than consciously correcting the underlying origins. They attempt to manage the symptoms of their challenges while simultaneously disregarding the root vibrations, and this precisely why so many individuals, despite their dedicated efforts, remain perpetually stuck. They're essentially attempting to construct a new and vibrant life while utilizing the same outdated and ineffective tools. This law doesn't merely invite you to break free from ingrained cycles, it actively demands it. It demands that you cease outsourcing your personal power, and that you cease operating under the illusion that you're merely along for the ride. The law of cause and effect doesn't implore you to necessarily embrace your current circumstances. It emphatically implores you to genuinely own them, not from a place of guilt or self-blame, but from a place of profound strength and empowerment, because once you consciously do, you can begin to trace the underlying signal back to its ultimate source. You can effectively reverse engineer your current results. And when you initiate that process, you inevitably arrive at a realization that the vast majority of individuals tragically never do. Nothing is truly beyond your sphere of influence. You can consciously become the cause, the initiating force, the conscious chooser, and the instant you do, you'll invariably begin to navigate the world in an entirely different and more empowering manner. You'll communicate with intention. You'll act with unwavering clarity. You'll consciously create with unwavering discipline. You'll begin to anticipate potential outcomes instead of being perpetually surprised by them. You'll cease navigating life in a state of constant reactivity and will instead consciously choose to live in rhythmic harmony with the universe. You'll begin to traverse your life with the profound knowing that nothing is truly random because you've deliberately taken your rightful seat at the source. And that's where true freedom invariably resides, not in futilely attempting to avoid pain or manipulate others, but in fundamentally comprehending how to trace every single experience back to its underlying thought, belief, vibration, or action. When you effectively master the law of cause and effect, you don't merely rectify your life, you inherently reclaim it. The world you inhabit is fundamentally constructed upon the interplay of opposites, hot and cold, light and darkness, good and evil, masculine and feminine. From the very moment of your birth, your mind was actively trained to compartmentalize reality into a series of binaries, this or that, right or wrong, win or lose. And while this inherent duality can be incredibly useful for navigating the physical world, it can also trap you within the confines of limitation if you never consciously cultivate the ability to perceive beyond it. The Kybalion addresses this fundamental challenge through two closely intertwined laws, the Law of Polarity and the Law of Gender. Together, these transformative laws expose the illusion of separation and provide a pathway toward achieving inner alchemy. Let's commence with polarity. This inherent law asserts that everything is inherently dual, but that so-called opposites are fundamentally the same in their underlying nature, merely differing in degree. Consider the concept of temperature. Hot and cold aren't distinct and separate forces. They're ultimately the very same thing measured along a continuous spectrum. Where does cold definitively end and heat definitively begin? You cannot definitively define it. You cannot definitively draw a distinct line of demarcation. The very same principle applies to love and hate, fear and courage, success and failure. They're simply different frequencies of the same underlying essence. Once you begin to grasp this fundamental truth, you'll begin to perceive that genuine transformation doesn't necessitate complete replacement. It merely necessitates a conscious elevation of frequency. You don't need to eradicate fear in order to embody courage. You merely need to transmute fear by consciously raising its inherent vibration. You don't need to eradicate the darkness, you merely need to consciously amplify the light. This inherent law also serves to expose the manipulative influence of polarity within society. Politics, media, and religion, they all thrive on binary thinking, us versus them, right versus left. You're invariably conditioned to believe that you must consciously choose a specific side, but rigidly defined sides invariably create division, and division serves to amplify control. The Kybalion emphasizes that genuine power isn't located within the extremes. It's invariably found in the harmonious balance of these seemingly opposing forces. Polarity isn't inherently the enemy, rigid attachment to any single pole is. Then there's the law of gender, arguably the most frequently misunderstood principle of them all. When individuals encounter the term gender, they invariably think of biological sex, but this principle bears no relationship to mere anatomy and has everything to do with the flow of universal energy. It teaches that both masculine and feminine forces inherently exist within everything and everyone. The masculine principle is inherently active, directive, and assertive. The feminine principle is inherently receptive, intuitive, and creative. Neither is inherently superior to the other. They're fundamentally complementary. They are two essential aspects of the very same underlying source, and when they are fundamentally out of harmonious equilibrium, things invariably fracture and break. Simply observe the world around you. We inhabit a predominantly hyper-masculine world, one that is overly obsessed with doing, forcing, and dominating productivity over authentic presence, control over innate intuition, and loudness over sacred quietude. But without the harmonious integration of the feminine principle, there can be no genuine creation. Without the inherent wisdom of the feminine principle, there is no inner guidance, no intuitive flow, and no harmonious integration, and the inevitable results. burnout, pervasive numbness, and profound disconnection, individuals achieving more while feeling intrinsically less, relentlessly hustling while simultaneously feeling hollow. When you comprehend the law of gender, you cease confusing softness with perceived weakness. You cease fearing intentional periods of stillness. You cease suppressing essential aspects of your own being in order to conform to societal roles, and instead you consciously choose to embrace internal harmonization. You learn when to actively exert effort and when to passively receive. You learn when to audibly speak and when to attentively listen. You learn when to actively build and when to intentionally rest. You cease viewing yourself as inherently fractured, and you instead consciously choose to integrate the full spectrum of who you authentically are. And this isn't merely about achieving personal equilibrium, it's about aligning with the cosmic order. The ancients firmly believed that genuine creation only transpires when these inherent polarities are consciously united in harmonious accord, that every act of manifestation, every birth of a new reality, invariably requires both the deliberate seeding and the fertile soil, the unwavering intention and the intuitive guidance, the creative fire and the receptive water. You inherently encompass both. You've invariably encompassed both. But society has conditioned you to overly identify with one while simultaneously suppressing the other, and then wonder why you continue to experience a pervasive sense of incompleteness. The Kybalion doesn't implore you to become someone you're not. It implores you to actively become whole, to consciously move beyond the limiting illusion of extremes and consciously step into the transformative space where genuine transformation thrives. Within the middle ground, where opposites harmoniously converge, where inherent polarity dissolves, and where authentic creation invariably begins. That's where your authentic power has been patiently awaiting, not in the futile act of choosing a singular side, but in consciously cultivating the inherent ability to harmoniously dance between them. The modern world frequently treats the Kybalion as if it's merely another esoteric text, forgotten, dusty, and symbolic. But its timeless teachings didn't fade into obscurity because they were inherently irrelevant. They were intentionally buried precisely because they were exceptionally too powerful. This profound knowledge was never consciously intended for widespread dissemination. It was meticulously preserved in complete secrecy, passed down through generations within clandestine mystery schools, veiled in allegorical representations, and protected by those who intimately understood its inherent potential, not because it posed a danger to the world, but because it posed a direct threat to those antiquated systems that profited from perpetuating widespread ignorance. You weren't supposed to become consciously aware that you're inherently a creator. You were consciously meant to believe that you're merely a passive consumer. You weren't supposed to comprehend how your thoughts actively shape your surrounding reality. You were consciously meant to outsource your thinking to external institutions, to governments, to established religions, and to the ubiquitous media. Systems of hierarchical power don't thrive when individuals cultivate the inherent capacity for independent thought. They thrive when individuals passively obey, blindly repeat, and unconsciously conform. And the Kybalion, in its very essence, stands as the antithesis of that pervasive model. It doesn't implore you to blindly join a movement. It empowers you to consciously awaken. Throughout the annals of history, this transformative knowledge has never truly disappeared. It has merely adopted different forms of expression. The profound Hermetic principles have been whispered within the hallowed halls of ancient Egyptian temples, echoed throughout the philosophical circles of ancient Greece, reinterpreted by Gnostics, alchemists, and Sufis, and even subtly embedded within the early expressions of Christian mysticism. You'll invariably discover faint traces of these timeless laws woven into the teachings of the Buddha, inscribed upon the emerald tablet of Hermes Trismegistus, encapsulated within the writings of Plato, and symbolized within the emblems of Freemasonry. They are ubiquitously present and simultaneously nowhere to be explicitly found, inherently concealed yet plainly visible, accessible only to those who are genuinely seeking deeper understanding. And this is no mere coincidence, because when you consciously strip away all layers of dogma and controlling influence, what remains is the bare architecture of reality itself. These profound principles serve as the foundational scaffolding underlying all expressions of spiritual systems. They represent the unshakable framework beneath the veil of mere metaphor. The Kybalion doesn't inherently contradict established religion. It merely unveils the very foundation upon which organized religion was initially constructed before it was systematically distorted by men with ulterior motives. That's why it frequently evokes a familiar resonance when you engage with its teachings. It speaks to something you've always inherently known, residing deep within the recesses of your being, far beneath all the external noise. But let's be unequivocally clear, this isn't about delving into obscure ancient history. This is inherently about the now. In a world that is currently drowning in pervasive distraction, rampant chaos, and algorithmic manipulation, hermetic knowledge serves as a direct threat to the status quo. It empowers you to embrace individual sovereignty over subservient submission, conscious creation over mindless consumption, internal truth over all forms of external noise. And the majority of individuals, unfortunately, have been deliberately conditioned to fear that very expression of individual freedom, to falsely perceive it as selfish, dangerous, and rebellious, and to instinctively view it as a tangible threat to established social order. And you know what? It truly is, but not in the manner they'd have you believe. Because when a critical mass of individuals consciously awaken to this transformative knowledge, everything inherently changes. Not through violent riots or destructive revolutions, but through the power of inherent resonance, through the quiet yet undeniable influence of individuals who cease aimlessly chasing and begin consciously embodying, who cease passively following scripts and begin consciously writing their own. That's the inherent threat to the current system, not through acts of overt violence, but through conscious vision, not through disruptive protests, but through authentic presence. When you consciously live in harmonious alignment with these universal laws, you inevitably radiate a vibrational frequency that becomes increasingly difficult to manipulate. You cease being easily programmable. You begin to embrace individual sovereignty, and this is precisely what those who benefit from your ignorance don't want, not they, in the sense of shadowy figures meeting in a hidden room, but the ubiquitous collective machinery of control that inherently depends upon your chronic distraction, your pervasive disempowerment, and your ingrained self-doubt. Because an individual who consciously knows they are the inherent cause, who consciously understands the principles of correspondence, who consciously masters their individual vibration, and who consciously balances their internal polarities, becomes virtually untouchable. You cannot consciously shame them into compliant obedience. You cannot consciously scare them into subservient silence. You cannot consciously sell them an illusion. They've consciously seen through it all. The enduring legacy of the Kybalion isn't a secret that is merely confined to the past. It's no longer consciously locked away within clandestine mystery schools or consciously cloaked in esoteric riddles. It's currently accessible to you right now, and that's the most fundamentally radical truth of all. You don't need explicit permission. You don't need formal initiation, you merely need conscious awareness. The gate has never truly been locked. You were simply never explicitly told that there was even a door to consciously open. Consciously understanding these inherent laws is one thing. Consciously living them out in your daily life is where everything truly undergoes a profound transformation, because knowledge without consistent embodiment is just another form of pervasive distraction. You can consciously read every esoteric text in existence, consciously memorize the 7 fundamental principles, and consciously quote them back with immaculate precision, yet still remain trapped within the very same self-defeating cycles if you never consciously apply them to your lived experience. The Kybalion isn't merely a philosophical treatise to passively admire. It's a practical manual to consciously integrate. These transformative laws aren't imploring you to consciously worship anything. They're empowering you to consciously awaken and consciously operate within reality with unwavering awareness. So, what does it truly mean to consciously live these inherent laws? It consciously means that you become intentional in every facet of your life, your thoughts, your emotional reactions, your deeply ingrained habits, and your personal energy. You begin to consciously notice how your internal state is actively creating your external world. You consciously observe how a minor shift in deeply held beliefs can consciously alter the course of a conversation. How consciously choosing authentic presence instead of succumbing to ingrained panic can consciously transform an entire day. How consciously mastering your individual response in a given moment of overwhelming stress doesn't merely consciously change the eventual outcome. It consciously rewires your very reality. Consciously living the law of mentalism consciously means that you cease allowing your thoughts to unconsciously run on autopilot. You consciously take personal responsibility for what you're consciously projecting, not merely what you're consciously perceiving. It's no longer fundamentally about blame or crippling guilt. It's consciously about conscious alignment. It's about consistently asking yourself, what am I consciously thinking right now? And is it consciously in harmonious alignment with what I consciously want to create? You don't passively await clarity to spontaneously appear. You actively cultivate it within. Consciously living the law of correspondence consciously means that you cease compartmentalizing your life into disconnected segments. There's no such thing as merely just work-related stress, or merely just a bad. So, to wrap it all up, the Kybalion offers us a powerful understanding that reality isn't a fixed, unchangeable thing happening to us, but something we actively participate in creating. By understanding these universal laws, mentalism, correspondence, vibration, and more, we can move from being passengers in our lives to becoming conscious architects, shaping our experiences with intention and clarity. It's about remembering that you are more powerful than you think, and the universe is far more responsive than you've been led to believe. Now, I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on all of this. What resonated most with you? What questions do you have? Please leave a comment down below and let's start a conversation. I genuinely value your insights and want to hear your experiences. And if you found this helpful and want to explore more topics like this, don't forget to subscribe. That way you won't miss out on future videos where we delve deeper into these fascinating concepts and how to apply them to our everyday lives. Thanks so much for watching.